Arc 5 World is coming, and you're going to learn how to Pendulum Summon. Activate as a spell. Activate as a spell. Pendulum Summon, triple Blue Eyes White Dragon. Completely legal. You could do it.
There can only be one winner, and you're looking at him. Let's go.
This is what I believe the pendulum field will look like. And if it does not look like that, it's going to push up the field zone, push up the graveyard. It's not going to change how you actually pendulum summon. It will just change the fact that it takes up your back row. So let's look at the anatomy of a pendulum card. A pendulum is half monster, half spell. You see how it's blue and then it's a monster card? It is a monster and a spell at the same time. Now, looking at this card, the anatomy of the card, what's highlighted is the pendulum spell effect. While it is face up on the field, that is the effect. So the effect is you cannot special summon monsters except Klee monsters. That's only while it's face up as a spell. And also you could pay 800 life to search your deck for a Klee card. That is a crazy cool effect on top of a normal monster with flavor text, not even having a monster effect. If it had a monster effect, that would only be valid while it's on the field as a monster. Now, moving on, what are these? These are the scales. Scales is what you use to perform a pendulum summon. The blue and the red scale are always going to be the same number, and that's where you play them on this field. It does not matter where you play it. You can play it on the right or the left. You can have a bigger number on the left and a smaller number on the right, or vice versa. It does not matter. So we're going to talk about pendulum summoning in a bit. How to use the pendulum. You activate it as a spell. It is a spell card activation, and then it's a face-up spell on the field, and it can only be in the pendulum zones. I do think Konami is going to not allow you to choose where you play them. It might just right away go from left to right, where normally if you play back row cards, you set in the middle, then you set in the right, then you set on the left. They're going to have to change the programming where it automatically sets. While face-up as a pendulum spell, it's considered a spell. It uses its pendulum effect, not the monster effect. You cannot set a pendulum face down even though it's half monster, half spell. Now, if you summon it as a monster, the scales and the pendulum effect do nothing. It now uses the monster effect. Whether you normal summon it, special summon it, you're going to use the monster effects part, not the pendulum, not the scales. If a pendulum is sent to the graveyard from the field, it does not go there. It goes to the top of your extra deck, to the top, face up on your extra deck, and you're going to find out why. Now, let's perform a pendulum summon using the scales. This is a 1 scale. This is a 9 scale. The small number does not need to be on the left or the right. It could be either or. It does not matter. So you activate both as a spell. There's no limit to how many pendulum spells you can activate, which, you know, they're pendulum monsters, but they're pendulum spells. But you cannot play a pendulum on top of a pendulum. So if you play a pendulum scale 1 and a pendulum scale 1, you're screwed. You can't send it to the graveyard by playing another one. You can't pendulum summon. They're just on the field, and hopefully they have good pendulum effects because their scales are now useless. So, to perform a pendulum summon, it does not activate nor start a chain link. It is once per turn like a normal summon. It can be negated by a Steel Storm Roach. Roach. And the turn. All right. Scale 7. Scale 3. Summon the entire freaking hand. The entire hand. Whole hand. Boom, just the 5s. It's an Easter egg. It's a secret effect. It doesn't actually say that it works that way, but it does because Konami says so. All right, thank you. So what it is you special summon as many monsters as you want from the hand that are level or ranks between the scales from the hand or from face up in your extra deck. So now that this card got returned to the extra deck face up, you could use the extra deck only face up and your hand at the same time to summon as many as you want. So in this circumstance, 1 to 9 means we could summon anything that's level 2 or rank 2 up to level 8 or rank 8. You cannot summon level 1s. You cannot summon level 9s. You could summon a level 9 if you had a level 10 scale, but in this circumstance, it would just be between 2 to 8 you could spill on the field. Now, if anything happens to them, they don't go to the graveyard, they go to the top of your extra deck. So in the next turn, you could resummon all of them. In TCG, they have a restriction where you can't summon all of your Pendulum monsters from your extra deck on the field. That would be considered unrestricted Pendulum Summoning. They created a new mechanic where you have to summon them in the middle of the field and you can only summon one of them at a time. But in Duel Links, it's going to be unrestricted. You could summon all of them, and TCG players may be concerned about that because that might be too broken. So here's an example of using our Pendulum Summon to just summon, spam summon onto the field. Now, don't get too worried about something like this. This is kind of cheating because most of these type of cards, if we were to even get these type of cards, they have an effect. If they're special summon, their attack is reduced. So Konami knows that they're going to continually be returned to the extra deck and be resummoned every turn. So they did make sure that it wouldn't be too broken. You're not spamming 2000 attack, 2000 attack from the hand and extra deck over and over every turn. I activate Cliff Fort Monolith as a spell into my Pendulum Zone. I activate Cliff Fort Scout into my Pendulum Zone as a spell. They could chain MST. They could activate Cosmic Cyclone. I set MST. And if I click Always Chain, activate, I could MST here. I could MST on the resolution. Okay? I could activate MST to the activation. I could activate MST on the resolution. After that, I could not MST. You could chain MST to the activation. You could activate MST to the resolution. If they then attempt to Pendulum Summon, you cannot MST. You cannot. You could MST to the summon, but that's it. So if I chain MST, the monster's already summoned. It's not going to negate the summon. It already happened. All right? I then, after my opponent says, I pass priority back to you, which is me, they're not going to activate anything. I say, okay, is this okay? Did it resolve? It's okay. I'm now going to perform a Pendulum Summon. Then they go, wait, I want to MST. It's too late. You cannot chain MST to a Pendulum attempt to summon. So I could summon my entire hand. Up to my entire hand. Anything that's level 2 to 8. Boom. Boom. Bam. And you could summon in defense or attack position. That is a Pendulum Summon. Now, here are some common questions after everything, even if it's already been stated. What happens if tributed / sent to the graveyard from the field? It is sent to the extra deck face up. If it's discarded from the hand, then it goes to the graveyard. If it's detached as an Exceed material, it goes to the graveyard. But if sent from the field to the grave in any way, it goes to the extra deck instead. If it's banished off the field, it gets banished. Will Konami make extra Pendulum Zones? There's no 100% confirmation. Extra Pendulum Zones or using the back row, this is what it would look like. It would push up the field spell. I don't think it will because, you know, we're a mobile game. The screens are going to have to get bigger. It's going to look more, it's going to look bad maybe, all right? Maybe the fact that Pendulums are unrestricted and they're summoning from the extra deck while face up is more reason to just use the back row for your Pendulum cards, which is like a nerf to the mechanic itself. But due to being unrestricted, we could probably handle taking up 2 of our 3 back row to perform a Pendulum Summon. I confidently believe they will use the back row. Pendulum Summons are inherent summons. Pendulums are considered an activated spell. If the pendulum or activation of a pendulum is negated, they go to the grave, not the extra, because they were never considered to hit the field. You have to Mystical Space Typhoon before the attempt to Pendulum Summon. So on the activation or on the resolution of a pendulum spell activation is when you have to Mystical Space Typhoon. After it resolves and I'm choosing to Pendulum Summon, you can't chain MST and that uses up my 1 Pendulum Summon. You have to MST before I even attempt to Pendulum Summon. I don't think there'll be card placement in Duel Links. They have said in an interview that currently they were not looking to do this. That would make the duels very long. Will Pendulums be the best deck? Well, looking at yugioh.topdecks.com, which does not have the full and total history of all of Yu-Gi-Oh!, even then, there's a lot of newer decks that came out after Pendulums, which are more popular and more top and better than the Pendulum decks right here. They just somehow they aligned in a row. Performapal, Magician, Cliffords, those are the big Pendulum decks in the TCG. It's not going to take over the entire game of Duel Links, probably not, as it did not for TCG. Some advanced things are, if sent from the field to the grave, they go to the extra deck face up instead. You cannot refusion, re-exceed, or re-synchro with a face-up extra deck Pendulum monster. That's right. There are going to be synchro Pendulums, which are half spell, half synchro. So how do you play them into the Pendulum zone if they are in the extra deck face down? Well, most of them have the effect when they get destroyed. They could go to the extra deck face up, which they are not resynchroable or re-exceedable, but you could choose instead to put them into the Pendulum zone to get their Pendulum effect. So you choose which. If they were properly summoned and then go to the extra deck face up, you could Pendulum summon them back on the field. That's going to be nuts. What are the community thoughts on Pendulums? Do you want them? The chat wants them. Some don't want them. Some are on the fence. Here's some cards that they were excited about. I'm sure I have a little montage of what they look like. Boom.